Mattel sent me a bunch of their upcoming cartoon collection MOTU Origins figures, and we're going to review them on this episode of Geek Dad Life. I want to thank Mattel for sending these figures for free for me to review. All they ask is that I give my honest opinion, and I plan to do that in this episode. All right, I gotta be honest, I have not been keeping up with the cartoon collection iteration of MOTU Origins. My focus has been far more into getting the Origins figures that are recreating their vintage counterparts from the 80s. But I gotta say, when I saw these figures at Comic-Con, there were a few of them that I knew I was gonna have to pick up. Number one being this Modulok. I knew I had to get this one because even though I guess it's technically in the cartoon collection, or at least that's what it's labeled as, this is absolutely a recreation of the vintage version of Modulok, which I have here. And so even though it has that, I guess, kind of cartoon collection trappings, if you're into Origins for the vintage action figure recreations, you definitely need to pick this one up. And then as far as cartoon collection is concerned, there is a focus for Shira's 40th anniversary. We've got new card backs and figures that do feature in that cartoon. But this Shira is infinitely better than the first Shira that we got, so I knew I was gonna have to pick her up. I was probably gonna pass on these two figures, but thankfully Mattel sent me the whole set so I can review them all and see if they're actually worth picking up. Starting with the packaging and starting with Modulok, I love how they approach the packaging for this figure. The original vintage one was just a box that had, all of the different combinations of parts to get, over 1,000 monsters from the 34 body parts. But I like that they added a window here so that you could see the figure. I think that's a really cool update to that vintage design. The back of the card has a big canvas for some beautiful artwork like we always got, which features characters we know, maybe characters we haven't gotten action figures of yet, and they have utilized that whole canvas to give us such an awesome scene and to get us speculating on maybe figures that could be coming in the line. We also got some little info boxes that showcase different ways to utilize the action figures features, and yeah, I think this is a great bit of packaging here for the deluxe Modulok. I love the change that they have done to the regular carded figures. So this is continuing the cartoon collection, but it is focusing on the 40th anniversary of Shira, and kind of like what they've done with previous MOTU Origins releases when they've done Snake Man and stuff like that. We have new theming on the card back. We have Hordak looking menacingly over Castle Grayskull that seems to be up in flames. We got bats on there. It's hard to ever beat the exploding red rocks over that blue starry sky, but this packaging I think looks really, really cool. And then we've got some artwork on the back of all of the cards. I love how they feature as seen on Treasure of the first ones. I think that's a really cool ad. I think they've been doing that with these figures so far. And we've got, again, info boxes on, different features of the figure. And we got cross-sell for the Shira, Ramman, and Mandana. All right, so enough talking about the outside of these figures. Let's open them up and see how they look. Okay, starting with Modulok, this figure is absolutely incredible. I love him. When you compare to the vintage one, this thing does what Origins has always been doing for these years that it's been on toy shelves. And that is taking the vintage figure and updating it in all of the right ways, and then paying homage to the original figures in all of the right ways. This is exactly what I would want from an Origins version of Modulok. All of the different parts and pieces, the innovative way that they kind of let you decide how you want to apply those pieces, again, just like the vintage one, but with all of that new articulation that we love in Origins. Now, I put, every single piece on, or at least mostly every single piece, so they can have 6 legs, 4 arms, 2 heads, much like I have my vintage figure set up. And it is just so freaking cool because unlike the vintage figure that's basically, it has a lot of moving parts, but it is still, an 80s toy with pretty limited articulation beyond just the cut points where the limbs connect to the figure. This one has all of the same articulation that you would get in MOTU Origins. You have, the swivel thighs, the rocker ankles, the ball joints at the hips. And what I really love, and I thought I wasn't going to like in person, was the split, two-headed neck joint. And while it does, it looks, pretty different from the vintage figure, I think it still captures the spirit of it pretty well. But what I really love is you can kind of pivot the heads to stack in a certain way, and or you can move it back, you move it forward. But I love this kind of look where you can kind of line up the heads, like one's a little bit more forward than the other one. And I think that looks really, really cool. But yeah, just all of the options that you have available to you with the articulation is phenomenal. The other thing I really like is you get two weapons holding hands, which you do not get on the vintage Modulok. So you can split the gun, you can hold both guns. They've added this shield accessory, which is really cool. And there's a lot of different ways you can have the figure hold the shield. But really, this thing is phenomenal. From a paint app perspective, it's pretty light, just like the vintage figure. But it's not feeling like it's lacking for paint applications. It has the paint applications you want. It's cast in that, kind of same red that the vintage one came in. And it really just pops on a shelf. And since it is so imposing with all of these articulated parts and all of these limbs and everything, this thing really stands out and will look really, really cool on your shelf. Something that just of note, there are a lot of pieces. When I opened this thing up, I gotta admit, I was a little intimidated. I was a little worried that this was gonna be a difficult process to get this thing set up. But really, you kind of quickly understand the different little ball joints that it comes with. There's ones that are obviously meant to be neck joints, or like shoulder or hip joints. And then there's ones that have the little connectors to attach limbs to the MOTU Origins, limb swapping system that we're all familiar with by this point. So it doesn't take long to figure out how you're supposed to use those little joint connector pieces to get your Modulok going. So this thing is a showstopper, could be the best MOTU Origins figure of 2025. And it's, one of the first MOTU Origins figures of 2025. Now, I know we were all concerned that this was going to be an Amazon exclusive. Cool thing about what they're doing with this Amazon exclusive is actually sharing that out with other toy vendors. So while it is an Amazon exclusive, they're taking pre-orders for it on a few different toy selling websites like Entertainment Earth and others. So while it is an Amazon exclusive, it should be hopefully easier to acquire than some other vendor exclusives, which I think is a really good thing. So Modulok is stunning. If you can get your hands on this one, get it, because it, I believe, is a showstopper and could be the best of the 2025 releases. All right, I'm gonna lead with the best from the regular MOTU Origins Cartoon Collection releases, and that is Shira. This figure looked incredible at San Diego Comic-Con in the Mattel booth this year, and in person, it looks just as good. While it doesn't have a ton of paint deco, it doesn't really need to. This is trying to recreate the cartoon version of this character. And to be honest, like having it side by side, the first release of Shira, and I know they've done a couple iterations to improve the look of this figure, it's not even a fair comparison. This cartoon version absolutely knocks it out of the park. It really looks phenomenal. I think all of the sculpting, just the silhouette of the figure they've captured really well. The accessories, I mean, the shield's a little clunky, I feel like, but the sword is perfect. And then the head sculpt and the paint applications on the head sculpt, it just looks really crisp, really clean. If I had to critique it, I would say maybe the gold plastic they use for the boots and the crown is a little subdued. It kind of gets lost with the blonde hair of the figure. But I'm kind of being nitpicky here. I do really think this Shira is the Shira we've been waiting for, is the Shira you're going to want to have on display in your collection. I just think she looks great. And just as a engineered action figure, I think they did a great job with her because the proportions look right throughout, but she's a sturdy figure. She stands up well, even with the high heel boots here. It's just a really well executed action figure. Absolutely is going to be one that you want to pick up if you want the most iconic version of Shira on your toy shelves. All right, next up is Mandana, and I personally will always prefer the vintage toy to the animated version or animated look of the character. So I'm probably not your best person to take on whether this one is a great figure or not, But if you're looking for the animated version of Mandana, this is the one that you're gonna want to go with. But for me, just, side by side, I just think the vintage toy version of the Origins figure looks cooler. But that is not a knock on what they're trying to do here. I think they do execute the Mandana, from the animated Shira series really well, and the figure, looks really good. Again, they're not really going too hard on the paint apps. They generally don't on MOTU Origins. What they do really well is in the color choices that they cast the figure in, and all of those look really, really good. The colors really pop. I love the blue with this dark kind of purpley blue. The head sculpt looks phenomenal, and something that I really applaud Mattel for doing is still giving the Mandana popping out eyes effect, which works slightly different. The vintage Origin style one, it just, pushes from the back and then pushes straight out, which is, again, more cartoon accurate. It's got a little spring behind it, so it has a little resistance, so it kind of pops right back into place. And I think, it's really fun that they added that feature. It's such an iconic part of Mandana, so I'm glad they still included it here because it's a much smaller head than the vintage figure, so you'd think it'd be harder to do that, but no, they actually do it, and they do it well. And then I also like that they gave us still the multiple legs. He's got 4 legs. Again, just like you saw him on the cartoon, and those articulate just like a MOTU Origins figure should. No accessories, no weapons or anything like that. It's just the figure. That's a bit of a bummer. I would put that as a knock on this release. But if you want a cartoon accurate version of Mandana on your toy shelves, this is the one you're gonna want to get. Last but not least is Ramman, and I gotta be honest, when I saw the figure that we were getting a cartoon version of this figure, I really wasn't that intrigued at picking it up. I thought that the MOTU Origins version, or the first version that we got, was perfectly fine. It recreated the action feature while updating some of the articulation that the original one never had. But I gotta say, this one has even more articulation than the first release in MOTU Origins, because the first release kept the same action feature, which was, the locking spring-loaded kind of bouncing or ramming effect that the figure had. I like that this one drops the action feature and actually gives you more articulation. So he can actually move at his waist. He can, move side to side, which the other one cannot. The actual leg articulation, I feel, is more full featured because doesn't have that spring-loaded mechanism, and his head moves around a lot better as well. One critique I do have is the outer armor is removable, which is good, but it's kind of a hard plastic. I think they should have went with a softer plastic, because then I think it could have taken even more advantage of this greater range of mobility that the cartoon version of Ramman has. Another reason why maybe this wouldn't replace your more vintage styled Ramman on your shelf is, since it is the cartoon design, this features are a lot softer on the outer armor compared to the first release, that I really think makes it a little more plain compared to this more vintage styled original release. Another thing is it doesn't really come with a lot of accessories. You have the idol of Shakoti from the episode House of Shakoti, and it's cool to get this if you've been waiting for this accessory forever and ever and ever. But for me, I think I'd rather have given Ramman some accessories, even though in the cartoon he just rams into thing and breaks down the wall that reveals Shakoti in the episode that this is pulling from. So by character, you don't need accessories for him, but it would have been cool to give him some accessories like the vintage figure had. You can swap accessories. He can hold the original Reese Ramman's accessories perfectly well. So it's probably not hard to find accessories for him, but I just gotta say, it's weird getting a figure in package, opening up, and all it comes with is, this piece of plastic. Whereas, I don't know, maybe call me old fashioned. I want some weapons or something to go with an action figure. Mandana didn't come with any weapons. Ramman doesn't come with any weapons, and it just makes it feel a little lesser than. Other than that, though, I think the figure turned out great. I do think it looks really, really good. If you were just planning on ignoring this figure because you've already got a Ramman, I think it's at least worth taking a look because the added articulation to this figure does make it more posable than that first release Ramman that included the action feature. So if that bums you out about that first release, maybe this is the Ramman for you. And that will do it for my review of the early 2025 cartoon collection releases for MOTU Origins. The Modulok is incredible. The Shira is phenomenal. There's some really good figures in this first wave that are definitely worth picking up if you are a MOTU fan, a MOTU Origins fan, or maybe just even just a fan of cool monsters to put on your shelf. This thing is absolutely fantastic. Mattel sent me all of their spring 2025 releases, so I'll be reviewing not only this cartoon collection, but the Masterverse releases as well as the Turtles of Grayskull releases. So make sure you hit the subscribe button and that bell icon so you don't miss any of those reviews. That's it for this episode. Until next time, hasta luego and goodbye.